Hey, it's James from Marketing for Restaurants here. Welcome to episode 147 of Secret Sauce, the restaurant marketing podcast, Restaurant Value Engineering in Japan with KFC at Christmas.
Some restaurants are quiet, lose money, and the owner works 70 hours a week. Other restaurants are busy, profitable, and the owners work a few hours a day. What's the difference? They have a secret sauce. Join James from Marketing for Restaurants as he helps you come up with your recipe for restaurant success. Your secret sauce.
Hey team, welcome back to the podcast. Hope you're getting a little bit of value out of our value engineering podcast series. This is the second one where we're going to be looking at value engineering. And what we've got is we've got a bit of a mini case study that we're going to look at. If you haven't listened to that, definitely have a listen to it first. We talk about what restaurant value engineering is. It's a fairly new term. Well, it's new to restaurants, but it hasn't been new in some other industries. And I think that it's one of those things that I think is really interesting because it's something that intrinsically some really successful restaurant operators are doing all the time. They're doing some components of it. Some of them are doing quite a lot of it. But this is something that's going to bring to the forefront something that you can really think about, something quite tangible for you to be able to understand how you can increase the profitability in your restaurant, which is pretty cool. Before we get on to restaurant value engineering and some ideas for how you can do that in your restaurant, if you think that your website is struggling to create the value that it should, if your website isn't being the team player that it needs to be, if it's not really pulling its weight in the sales and the marketing part of your team, then definitely jump on marketingforrestaurants.com and have a look at our free website audits. We've got a 7-point checklist where we go through and no obligation at all. It's a quick 15-minute chat with you about some of the issues that we see all the time in restaurant websites. Now, no obligation. You don't need to buy a website from us. We'd like to think that you would because we make pretty damn epic websites for an extremely cost-effective, restaurant-friendly price. But if you've got a web developer and you want to continue working with them, then we'll give you a list that you can give to your web developer to fix up the things that have probably been costing you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every month in lost revenue. And we find that fairly routinely with the websites that we look at, particularly when they come across to us, when they get a website that's done properly. You can find significant increases in traffic. And the key thing is, it's not about the traffic, it's about getting those people who go to your website to be so excited about the food that you're cooking that they will come into your restaurant and they will buy some food from you. And that's what we like to think we've got, a recipe for building that integrated process. Now, restaurant value engineering, we're thinking Japan, we're thinking KFC, and we're thinking Christmas. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. How do those three things go together in any way, shape, or form? Because it is all really quite random. Japan, traditionally not a country that celebrates Christmas. Christmas, not a time that people traditionally celebrate with chicken, let alone Kentucky Fried Chicken. But somehow the Colonel's gotten in there. How has he done it? What is the story behind it? And what is the value that has been created with this really cool marketing/restaurant value engineering process? Now, I'm viewing this as more value engineering than marketing because marketing is all about getting the word out about a product or service that meets a demand. This is something that didn't have a demand. So it's a pretty cool story. Let's get into it. More than half the people in Japan have no religion. 31% are Buddhist, 3% Shinto, just 1% worship Christianity. So it's a little bit interesting that a Christian holiday, Christmas, would be so popular in Japan. The story begins all the way back in 1945 with the end of the Second World War after Japan surrendered to the United States. This brought a significant period of austerity for the Japanese people as the economy slowly was rebuilt. During the 50s and the 60s, there was increasing prosperity about, and people started to have some disposable income, and they were very much interested in the culture of the United States. I think it might be fair to say that there was a fair amount of cultural appropriation as the Japanese were borrowing or taking from American culture, particularly GIs who were stationed in Japan, and the growing number of business and tourists in Japan from the United States. KFC Japan was originally a joint venture between the United States corporate KFC and the Japanese Mitsubishi Corporation. Significant amount of negotiation went into it, and after 4 years, Mitsubishi was awarded the franchise rights, and they opened a store in Osaka. That was in March 1970. They had a couple of hiccups. The first two stores were quite good. They then opened stores, KFC in the United States, they wanted a suburban expansion strategy, and that didn't work too well. Significantly because of the differences in the way that people, or the way that public transportation worked in Japan. Now, cars weren't as ubiquitous as they were in the United States, and that meant it was a lot more difficult for people to be mobile in the suburbs. KFC Japan, they knew this, they understood it, and that's why they were keen to follow a urban rollout. That's what they transitioned to in 1972, and after that, they were cooking with gas. Things really started to take off. Harlan Sanders himself, the Colonel, he came out and visited Japan 3 times. By 1983, they had 390 outlets, and they were doing $300 million in sales. And at this point, it was KFC's largest single foreign market. 1993, $1.2 billion in sales from 1,000 outlets. But as often happens with franchise rollouts, there was a significant amount of same-store cannibalization as there wasn't enough geographic spread between stores. 100 of those closed. Today, they're back around the 1,100 stores and they're doing $732 million in sales. So that's not a bad effort. That's the story of KFC in Japan. But how do we get Christmas into this mix? For that, we need to go all the way back to the start, to 1970, Takashi Okawara. He was the manager at the first KFC restaurant in Japan. Now, the story goes, and it may be apocryphal or it may have actually happened, but the story goes that he heard one of his Western friends complaining that it was impossible to get turkey for a Christmas lunch or Christmas dinner. And so turkey, very hard to get in Japan at those times in 1970. But if all you've got is a hammer, then every problem that you see is going to be a nail. And necessity is the mother of all invention. He didn't have any turkey to sell, but he was trying to sell chicken. And chicken and turkey, kind of close enough? Well, sort of close enough. There's a couple of other stories that float around about the concept, the origins of the concept of a KFC Christmas. One story has it that a customer asked for some fried chicken to be delivered in a Santa costume on Christmas. Another has Okawara going to a Christmas party dressed as Santa, and the kids really enjoyed the Santa kind of figure. Who wouldn't? And he thought that there was a big business opportunity around that. Either way, there's a couple of interesting things at this point. The United States, a cultural powerhouse, and people in Japan were very hungry, literally very hungry, for the components of the US culture. Okawara just came up with the concept of a party barrel, a big bucket of fried chicken, which is an analogy for the turkey that you would have at Christmas. The concept of Christmas was non-existent in Japan at this time. So there was a big opportunity to create what Christmas could be or should be in Japan. And this is what Okawara understood. The concept was proven. Chicken was a popular Christmas meal. And so the brand decided to double down on this. And in 1974, they launched their Kentucky for Christmas marketing campaign. The buckets evolved over time. You can now get them with salad, cakes, even Kentucky Fried or KFC wine, special Christmas bottles of wine. That sounds exciting. And they are incredibly popular. The concept continually evolved. There's large statues of Colonel Sanders dressed up as Santa. And in 2020, KFC celebrated 50 years in Japan. One of the things that I find really interesting in this story is that about 10 years ago, McDonald's Japan had a really good crack at trying to break into the Christmas market. They wanted to associate McDonald's burgers with the kind of food that you would eat on Christmas Day. They didn't have any luck. And why is that? Because it's not traditional to eat McDonald's on Christmas Day. It's not traditional like it is to eat KFC. This is a tradition that then had been going on for 40 years. So you had a multi-generational group of people who accepted the fact that KFC, that's what you have around Christmas. The specials run for 7 days, starting from the 19th of December. Now, when I was researching this, I found an interesting quote from a Japanese lady. I remember my father bringing home a party barrel when I was a teenager in the early 70s and thinking how different and exciting it was. Tomoko Uka from Saitama Prefecture in north of Tokyo. Even now, KFC restaurants can be found everywhere in Japan, but I never eat there, and my family only orders takeout at Christmas. It has become a tradition in our house now, even though I have heard that they do not eat KFC in other countries for Christmas. I was surprised when I heard that. Now, obviously in the 70s, it's a little bit easier to get away with, well, a little bit of marketing puffery. You wouldn't be able to get away with that kind of thing now because the internet with its global connectivity, you'd get called out pretty early. But in 1970, there was enough space, there was enough isolation for KFC to build this dominant narrative that, hey, it's Christmas time, you certainly want to be inviting the Colonel to your Christmas Day luncheon. And it was something that the Japanese people wanted. So it would be difficult to do something like that today with social media and the interconnectedness of the marketplace. Or does that create opportunity? That would be the question that I would ask, because I think that when it comes to things like restaurant value engineering, I think that there is a huge opportunity for you when you can get it right, when you can actually get that mix right, that it can pay off really, really big. And there would be just one example that I'd throw in here, a very successful sort of cafe kind of guy, cafe/bakery, Aki Dakos from Foodcraft Espresso in Sydney. So the Teleball milkshake, you might remember this, a completely new product, really played to their strengths, leveraged off a product that they already have, and he was able to he generated potentially more than $1 million worth of advertising. He was on news programs, he was all over the television, all over international media, because of the process that he'd taken to look at what it was that he had, look at what potentially might fit in the marketplace, and how he could find that nexus between those two groups and have a crack, produce a product, and see how it went. And really, really, really did pay off well for him. I just had a quick look. I think it was 2015 that was done. They're still around. They're still doing an amazing job with that. For Takeshi Okawara, this worked extremely well. He was able to take that hunch, whatever the founding myth, whatever actually happened in reality, he was able to do that. He was able to capitalize on it. He was able to grow it. Head office picked it up and ran with it. They ran the Kentucky for Christmas campaign, and he was able to steadily rise up through the ranks, and he served as the president of KFC Japan from 1984 to 2002. So that's a pretty cool story. The thing that I think is interesting about it, though, and when I talk about these sort of concepts with the restaurant owners when we're doing consulting, a lot of them say, yeah, but how do you get lucky like that? That's that one-off piece of inspiration that, you've got to be lucky to have that. And I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. I remember talking to a restaurant owner and he said we were talking about menu engineering, which, is one of the three engineerings that we look at. We were talking about it and he said, I don't really like to change up my menu. I think it's very risky. We're a traditional restaurant here. And it was interesting because we were sitting right next to the specials board. And I said, well, that's really interesting. You've got a specials board here. How often does that change? And he said, well, you know what, I change it, sort of daily. There's some things that appear on there a lot more often, and there's some things that we sort of put on based on what we can get at the market. That's a motherhood kind of statement. Everyone should have sort of be, or many restaurants have got a very similar kind of process. But the thing is, he'll put some things on, and we talked about it for a little bit because I wanted to really pick at this thread. And he said that the chef would come up with an idea that he would want to try, and then, maybe it would be, he'd be able to get the produce for it, and then they would do it, and then it would be successful or not. And if it wasn't successful, then they might drop it. And then he said, this is the danger, is that you can't get all excited about these things because sometimes they're unsuccessful. What he didn't realize, though, was that he was following part of that innovation and creativity process. And for a restaurant, the easiest part of that is the actual specials board. You can put something up. If no one orders it, then it's probably not great. If you sell out of it really quickly, then that you're onto a big thing. This is what happened to Archidakos. They had a process where him and his business partners would sit around. Now, they weren't sitting there in like our test kitchen. And I know some restaurants do have a test kitchen, and that's fantastic if you can afford it. They weren't sitting down in their test kitchen, but they were always saying, hey, what if we did this? What if we did that? And their restaurant had evolved. Their profitability had evolved because they had that process. They were continually just trying to tweak it a little thing. They'd come up with something because everyone goes, oh, wow, they were so lucky to have the tellable milkshake, That's one of those things. Well, no, that was part of their innovation creativity program because they had the tellable already. They had led the way. They were the ones who'd thought about that. And if you haven't heard the story, they actually created a countrywide shortage of Nutella. Obviously, there's not a huge amount of Nutella that's bought, but they couldn't keep these things on the shelf. They were buying pallet loads of Nutella, which is really quite interesting. Because it was so popular, they got so much media attention. And the thing that many people forget, they say, oh, that's a one-off. Well, it's not actually a one-off because they had a really successful product to start out with, and that was the Tellaball. And when I went in there to try the Tellaball shake, they had counters full of the Tellaballs because that was still a product that was selling really, really successfully. There's a couple of interesting things that I think talk to the success of Kentucky for Christmas campaign. The first thing was that it wasn't too far-fetched. This wasn't something very radical because, of course, Japan's got karaage. I hope I said that right. Karaage, which is, traditionally I think it's a panko-crusted, fried, generally chicken, but you can get vegetables and seafood as well. It is super yummy. And the first time I had it, it was like, this kind of tastes like KFC. It's like Japanese KFC. So without any hinting or prompting, I was able to make that association. So KFC wasn't too far removed from what it was that Japanese people were used to. What it did do was he was able to analyze a potential gap in the marketplace. It's wrapped up around Christmas. It's wrapped up potentially around the inability to get turkey in Japan in 1970. And it's wrapped up in a growing appetite for good old American culture. And, my gut feel is that it's probably not any of those things individually. What he's been able to do is to identify the sweet spot. Christmas, American, turkey, Santa Claus, all of those sort of things, put them all together, and it's a product that people just go, hey, this is really cool. Then when he had a little bit of success, head office, they doubled down. They went in big with the brand marketing to really cement that Kentucky for Christmas kind of idea in people's heads. And it was interesting because I was reading one of the interviews with people who love KFC for Christmas, and they said that they don't eat KFC except at Christmas time because that is the tradition. They're not really buying KFC. they're buying into, this is what our family does. It is Christmas time, and this is the thing that's amazing. When you say that this is what Japanese people are doing for Japan, if you're from a country that celebrates Christmas, you've got to divorce yourself from that sort of thinking, because it's not even a holiday in Japan. So the kids have got to go to school. So it's not even a real holiday. But at that time of year, families would go out, they would go and get their bucket of chicken, and it was a time to get everyone together, to have some KFC, and that's the tradition. And that's really important when you think about it in a family. The two most important things in our family, apart from the actual ritual of Christmas Day, the opening of the presents with the kids, and then the hours spent in the kitchen as we prepare the turkey, pork and ham. So we have the ham cold, but we'll have hot turkey and hot pork, even when it's sometimes 40 degrees, like 104 Fahrenheit. But we've still got to have our roast vegetables and everything, because that's what we do. That's our tradition. And the other thing that's really important with that is we've got to watch the Griswold's Family Christmas and, of course, Die Hard, the best Christmas movie ever made. And that was what head office did. So they were able to take that little bit of marketing spin, that sweet spot that had been discovered, and they turned that into a tradition. And that gets really powerful. Today, KFC will do up to 10 times their daily revenue over the Christmas period, particularly, I think, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Many people order ahead, as we know, is fantastic for revenue and profitability. And those that don't, then they're the ones who are stuck in the queue for extended periods of time. So I think that this is a really valuable example of some restaurant value engineering. What they've done is they've taken an opportunity and they really have pushed it pretty hard with some marketing backup. And they've built a really, really strong product offering, i.e. a traditional Christmas meal, where the actual brand is a part of that tradition. And that is really powerful, because when they had McDonald's come after them and try and muscle in on that, they weren't able to get anywhere, because the tradition isn't about the meal it's had, it's about getting your barrel from KFC. They own that space. That's so cool. And it really is just around that process of looking at the resources that you've got, whether it's food, capability, brand, and looking at what it is that your customers want. I'll end here with probably the most important part for this episode, and that is, I've said it before, don't sell food, because food is a commodity product. I can, right now, go to the supermarket and get food. I can do that. In fact, I can get food delivered now from the supermarket. So they will also deliver to me. I could get a pie and put it in the oven. You need to be looking for something more to be able to sell. And this is the whole thing, niching down all of your customer segments and all of the things that they want to make sure that you're addressing each and every one of them in a way that is appropriate and, most critically, does not leave profit on the table. Too many restaurants are missing out on little niches that could be really profitable for them, and too many are serving those niches but not treating them as a niche. They're treating them as mass market, and that means that they're leaving money on the table. And that is the last thing that you want to do, particularly in a time like now. Yep, stay tuned for next week's episode. It's going to be super exciting. Already got some really interesting ideas that will, without a whole lot of effort for some of them, are going to increase your bottom line quite quickly. So yeah, think about what you can do from a value engineering point of view. Think about the innovation and creativity process. We've got some good podcasts on that, which I think are quite powerful. Yeah, we're going to do some cool engineering next week. Bye.
Want more customers for your restaurant, cafe or takeout? Every month, our marketing tools and information are used by thousands of restaurant owners just like you to help them find more customers and turn them into repeat customers. All of our tools and information is designed specifically for restaurant owners. We know you don't have a lot of time to spend marketing or learning complicated procedures, so our tools are quick and easy to use. If you're looking to increase your revenue and profits or want to work less hours, check out marketingforrestaurants.com.